afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for coming. If we could please just come closer and fill up the seats here in the front. We are going to start shortly, just in 1 minute. Okay, as you're well aware, I'm not running the program today, but welcome to the Sustainable Infrastructure Development Symposium South Africa 2025. Thank you all to the members of the media for joining us this morning at a site visit. I'm sure the minister will reflect on that, and also for coming to this media briefing. I'm going to hand over to the Deputy Minister in the Presidency, the Honorable Kenneth Morolong, to take over the program. He'll be moderating. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nombulelo, and good afternoon, colleagues. Let me take this opportunity to welcome members of the media who are here with us this afternoon. Let me also take the opportunity to welcome Minister Dean McPherson, Deputy Minister SIDSSA25 Zigalala, the Director General of Public Works and Infrastructure, Mr. Sfiso Mdagane, Head of Infrastructure South Africa, Ms. Mameti Masemula. I'm honestly quite honored to moderate this important media briefing of Infrastructure South Africa. We welcome you to the media briefing, which will set the tone on the program for the next 2 days. The purpose of this media briefing is to provide an update on the work of Infrastructure South Africa for the past 12 months. But it will also unveil the program for the next 2 days. Sustainable Infrastructure Development Symposium of South Africa is an annual event which brings together thought leaders, government representatives, infrastructure funding and financing institutions, and industry experts to discuss key strategic insights on the best practices for infrastructure development and investment. It is the intention of the symposium to foster regional integration and grow a credible pipeline of bi-national infrastructure projects. This year, we will be hosting 10 foreign ministers, whose details will be announced later today. We are thrilled to announce the following ministers who are joining us in this session this afternoon. Minister Ndwandwe from Eswatini, Minister Moteane from Lesotho, Minister Nekunde from Namibia, and Minister Museneri from Uganda. We also, I'm told, have in our midst the MEC for Public Works and Infrastructure in the Free State, Ms. Dibulelo Mahlatsi. Infrastructure South Africa has over the years curated a bankable pipeline projects which can be found in the Infrastructure Investment Book, which was unveiled last year. These projects are segmented in 4 parts, namely strategic integrated projects, blended finance pipeline, preparation projects, and the pipeline. Through Infrastructure South Africa, the country has developed its National Infrastructure Plan 2025 through extensive public participation process during the course of 2021. The goal of NIP 2050 is to create a foundation for achieving the country's NDP vision of inclusive growth. Its purpose is also to promote dynamism in infrastructure delivery, address institutional backlogs, and weaknesses that hinder success over the long term. The Infrastructure Fund is a portfolio of blended finance projects and programs The fund is managed by Infrastructure South Africa and operationalized by the Development Bank of Southern Africa through a ring-fenced division of the bank. SIDSSA is therefore a single point of entry for infrastructure investment and coordination. Working with project owners and sponsors, SIDSSA develops a credible infrastructure pipeline of high-impact infrastructure projects which are bankable and fundable. We will today receive an update on the Gazetted Strategic Integrated Projects, Project Preparation Funding and Infrastructure Funding Pipeline. We will conclude the briefing with a signing ceremony of MOUs with key stakeholders who will be called to the front at an appropriate time. Deputy Minister Zikalala will render closing remarks to mark the end of the briefing. At this point, we are thrilled to invite Minister McPherson to the stage, who will brief the media on the update for the past 12 months and the program of this year's symposium. Minister.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, ministers present, MECs present, Deputy Minister Zikalala, the Director General, all government officials, and happy Africa Day today. It is very fitting that we mark Africa Day with so many of our counterparts from the African continent. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all to the city of Cape Town ahead of the 2025 edition of the Sustainable Infrastructure Development Symposium in South Africa, or SIDSSA as we call it. This week, government, business, development financiers, and technical experts will come together with a singular focus. How do we use infrastructure to drive South Africa's economic recovery, attract investment, and most importantly, create jobs? SIDSSA is not just a conversation. It is a platform for execution. On Tuesday, His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa will officially open the symposium and deliver his keynote address. But today I want to give the public a sense of what they can look forward to and why this gathering matters. Firstly, we are proud to announce that on Tuesday, the 27th of May, we will be launching the second edition of the construction book compiled by Infrastructure South Africa. This is a live inventory of construction-ready projects that are already funded and scheduled to go to the market over the next 12 months. It showcases the real work being done to build roads, expand water supply systems, unlock energy capacity, and rehabilitate public infrastructure. This year's construction book includes over 200 funded projects, part of the annual procurement plans of state-owned enterprises, municipalities, and provinces across the country. Ladies and gentlemen, the goal is clear. We must accelerate delivery, stimulate growth, and turn South Africa into a construction site. Secondly, the President and I will announce the next wave of priority projects that Infrastructure South Africa will support through detailed project preparation. These include 8 nationally significant infrastructure projects that were prioritized at SIDSSA last year. I will also be providing an update on these projects in due course, while the President will outline the broader strategic significance of these projects in his keynote address. Ladies and gentlemen, it is evident for anyone to see that we are making real progress in the infrastructure space across the length and breadth of South Africa. These projects are no longer just aspirational. They are funded, contracted, and moving through feasibility and procurement stages with urgency and transparency. One of the biggest reforms we've made has been to prioritize project preparation funding. Through Infrastructure South Africa, we are ensuring that public sector projects no longer fail at the first hurdle due to weak planning, poor structuring, or lack of compliance. Over 600 million rand has now been committed to prepare strategic infrastructure projects, from basic services to catalytic energy and water investments. That means real funding for feasibility studies, regulatory compliance, bankability designs, and community consultations are now taking place at a pace and with a hands-on approach. And let me say that this preparation is working. Projects are now moving from planning to procurement, and from procurement to breaking ground. Another important update that we will share this week is the progress on the now launched Adopt-A-Municipality Program. The 7th administration launched this initiative to address capacity constraints at local level, and the results are beginning to show. Infrastructure South Africa and myself have signed agreements with 3 pilot municipalities, Metsimaholo, Govan-Mbeki, and Amgeni Local Municipality. In each case, we are working directly with the mayors, municipal managers, and engineers to unblock stalled projects, improve procurement systems, and get delivery moving. Just in those municipalities, we seek to launch 24 projects with a combined value of 3.8 billion rand. And think about the transformative nature that that sort of funding and preparation can have for local municipalities. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not interference. This is about partnership, and this is one of the key strengths of Infrastructure South Africa. Because our goal is to support, not to take over local government. SIDSSA is also a moment to reflect on how we use the assets of the state for public good. Over the past year, we have begun repurposing public buildings for public good. We are turbocharging private investment into public properties, which will see investment in supporting infrastructure. For the first time, we are releasing 31 properties nationwide for investment, which will allow the public and private sectors to work together on how best they can be utilized. This is the first phase of this program, which we estimate will attract an additional 10 billion rand in these properties through the private sector and create, between construction and service-related jobs, 165,000 opportunities. Furthermore, vacant and underutilized properties are now being handed over to provincial governments and local municipalities to serve as shelters, youth centers, and service delivery points. The era of state buildings standing idle while communities go without them must come to an end. Public properties must serve the public and the public purpose. Just as we've taken action to unlock projects and better utilize public assets, we've also acted to tackle those that seek to disrupt delivery. The construction mafia has, for too long, held infrastructure projects hostage through intimidation and extortion. That's why last year we signed the Durban Declaration with industry stakeholders and law enforcement agencies to coordinate our response. Since then, more than 250 arrests have been made across the country, and we are beginning to see a decline in site disruptions. Our message is simple, ladies and gentlemen. There will be zero tolerance for lawlessness and sabotage in public infrastructure projects. We must also be honest about the scale of what lies ahead. If we are to close South Africa's infrastructure investment gap, we must deepen partnerships, crowd in more private capital, and ensure that every project is thoroughly prepared and transparently executed. And that is the real work of SIDSSA, connecting ideas to investment and policies to find progress. There is a reason why we are hosting SIDSSA here in Century City. Just a few kilometers away, the Cape Town International Convention Centre was once a major infrastructure project itself, Today, it is globally recognized as what a public-private partnership can achieve when projects are well prepared and well executed. That is the standard that we want to see across the country, and indeed even what we saw this morning at Potsdam as a wastewater treatment project is underway, the single biggest infrastructure in wastewater treatment of 5.2 billion rand by the City of Cape Town. So, ladies and gentlemen, SIDSSA is not about making new promises. It's about reporting back, building momentum, and demonstrating that this government is serious about delivery and serious about infrastructure. Over the past 4 years, we have gazetted more than 300 strategic infrastructure projects. We have committed over 300 billion rand in infrastructure investment, and through the work of Infrastructure South Africa, we are aligning our efforts to ensure that infrastructure serves not only the economy, but the people of this country that we so dearly love. This week is about showing South Africa what is being built and what is coming up to be built. Ladies and gentlemen, we are ready. The projects are ready, and it's now time for us to deliver. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Minister, for expounding on the program for SIDSSA and for really taking us into confidence about the work of Infrastructure South Africa for the past 12 months. At this point, let me invite Ms. Mamedzi Masemola, who will elaborate more on Gazetted Strategic Integrated Projects. She's the head of Infrastructure South Africa. Ms. Masemola.
Good afternoon, everyone. I believe that the slide deck that I'll take you through will be uploaded on the screens, and someone else will be running those as I proceed with my input for this afternoon's media conference. Just as a recap, and the Minister has elaborated on this, that Infrastructure South Africa derives its mandate from the Infrastructure Development Act. So this is an act that was promulgated in 2014 by the President, and it's aimed at facilitating, coordinating, and overseeing the implementation of what is termed strategic integrated projects. So from an Infrastructure South Africa perspective, our work is very clear. We are mandated to close the infrastructure investment gap, and we do that through or by preparing and packaging infrastructure investments or high-value infrastructure projects and programs such that they are viable and they are indeed bankable. And so from the work that we're going to be sharing with you today, we will focus in the main on the future project pipeline. These are projects that we're currently preparing and packaging, and also focusing on strategic integrated projects. So the portfolio that the Minister referenced, that we have, we're overseeing over 300 projects currently that have been gazetted in the 6th administration, and we monitor those projects on an ongoing basis, and we'll be able to report to you on the level of progress and implementation of these projects. In the next slide, okay, if I see that the slides are not running, or they are, Togo, thank you very much. So the qualifying criteria for projects that comes through the window of ISA is that firstly, their estimated value has to be 1 billion rand and above. The reason is that we have to focus on these high value, high impact infrastructure projects that are able to move the dial from an economic perspective and from a social development perspective. And our priority sectors, they remain those of network industries, because they've got greater multiplier effects in the economy. So we are focusing on freight, transport and freight logistics, energy, information communication technologies, as well as water and sanitation. In addition, we also focus on human settlements projects, and the reason is that they also force municipalities to invest in municipal bulk infrastructure, because only when that infrastructure is available, it can unlock the top structures. And so they are really one of the sectors that we're focusing on. And then lastly, of course, it is special economic zones or industrial development zones that the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition is actually mandated to oversee, etc. So we work with some of these special economic zones that we are preparing and packaging those projects so that we can enable infrastructure to be installed in those geographic spaces, and thereby attracting private sector investment. Our focus as well is that we do not focus on projects that are going to rely 100% on fiscal allocations from the National Treasury. The Minister of Finance and his team are very clear. Any project that does not leverage or does not increase the participation of the private sector, the project sponsor must reprioritize their own baseline budget to support that particular project. And so our posture is that all of those projects that we are onboarding from an Infrastructure South Africa perspective, these projects must be PPPs, public and private partnerships. There must be projects that are blended finance in blended finance candidates. And the next presentation from the Infrastructure Fund will elaborate on that particular pipeline, or projects that are commercially viable. If they are, social infrastructure programs, they have to indicate that they must demonstrate that there is innovative financing mechanisms that can be, used to structure those projects from a financial perspective, such that they are leveraging or onboarding private sector participation. So from our side, what are the top line economic indicators that we're looking at from in terms of the pipeline that we're working on? Firstly is that we look at the quantum of fiscal risk that is shifted from public to the private sector. We're looking at these projects from a GDP impact perspective. We're looking at these projects from a localization perspective, the utilization of local content, be it labor or materials, as well as job creation, which is, so those will be the top line economic indicators that we track in relation to the pipeline of projects that we have. Just in terms of the next slide, just in terms of the projects that have been registered with Infrastructure South Africa. So firstly, let me explain that we have a very elaborate infrastructure project and accountability framework within ISA. And all the governance structures that we have set up, they do have direct participation of local and international financing institutions, the Infrastructure Fund, the National Treasury, etc. And the reason is that these are funding and financing institutions, so they have to have line of sight of these projects at the onset and be able to indicate that this is the project that potentially can form part of the 3 funding pathways that I referenced earlier. Projects that are PPPs in nature, projects that are blended finance candidate, projects that can be commercially viable. And so in terms of the current status of the projects that have been onboarded by Infrastructure South Africa in the past 12 months, we have 53 projects. A significant number of these projects, over 2/3 of them, are private sector-led infrastructure projects. So Infrastructure South Africa is the only agency currently that works with private sector companies, onboards their projects, registers them officially, and we work with the project owners to troubleshoot, to ensure that regulatory unblockings are being undertaken, and that these projects get to be implemented as quickly as possible. So in terms of the portfolio of projects, A significant number of those are in the energy space. So in the energy space, you've got your green hydrogen program, your REAP program, embedded generation, transmission lines, etc. So that's the portfolio of projects that sit in the SIDSSA environment, and then the others are spread according to the sectors that you see on the screen. And again, our work is to ensure that from a private sector-led infrastructure projects, that these projects are assisted with the multiple authorizations, permits, licenses, etc., that are required across a government. I think we ourselves and the team in Infrastructure South Africa, we know that one renewable energy project, for example, requires almost 85 different types of permits, licenses and authorizations in government, whether it is from the Civil Aviation Authority, it is ATNS, is the South African Defence Force, South African National Defence Force is the National Department of Public Works and Infrastructure on servitudes, etc. So that's what we're dealing with. So we assist these projects so that they can be implemented as quickly as possible, and these will be private sector projects. From an integrated strategic projects perspective, here are the numbers that we are showing you this afternoon. A number of these projects have been implemented in the last 5 years, and some of them are in construction. The minister spoke about the site visit that we undertook this morning on the Potsdam wastewater treatment works. There are other projects that have been fully commercialized in the energy space, and that includes your Redstone concentrated solar thermal power project and others as well. We're also showcasing in the next slides some of the strategic integrated projects that are currently in construction. As you know, these are multi-year, multi-billion rand infrastructure investments, so they're taking place over a number of years, and some of them includes the Sandral N2 and N3 upgrades in KwaZulu-Natal. We've got the Rooival wastewater treatment plant in Pretoria, the extension and expansion of that wastewater treatment plant. We also have your Kwandokuhle social housing project in Mpumalanga. They form also part of the infrastructure fund project pipeline. Then we give you a sense of, in the next slides, we give you a sense of some of these projects that we are currently preparing and packaging, and hopefully in the next 12 months or 18 months, they'll be coming on stream, meaning that they'll be going out to market to onboard EPCs, etc. And we thought that we also share with you some of the work that came out of the World Bank report recently that shows that, from a project preparation perspective, this really, it remains one of the areas with the most room for improvement. So most countries, we are battling with just ensuring that we pull all the project preparation facilities together, and we build a momentum behind high-value national priority infrastructure projects. But from a Infrastructure South Africa perspective, we have a total of 34 projects that we're preparing and packaging currently. They cut across all the spheres of government, including public entities, state-owned entities. And for now, we have completed studies or feasibility studies and other related aspects from a business case perspective on 10 projects. And we are pleased to inform you that some of these projects have already unlocked additional fiscal allocations from the National Treasury through the budget facility for infrastructure, and those includes the Tygerberg Hospital here in the Western Cape, which is a PPP. It also includes the High Capacity Rail Project of Transnet, or TFR, which is a 9.4 billion rand project that is championed or led by the Transnet. And also some of the work that we have completed in the current financial year or the previous financial year is the Dr. Kenneth Kaunda Water and Sanitation Program. Some of the projects that we did announce last year at the SIDSSA, include in the next slide, the top 12 priority projects. We also provide you with some update on what has transpired as well, that these projects have already been contracted in terms of onboarding PSPs or transactional advisory services to help us to build business cases for these projects such that they are viable. And those they include Namakwa SEZ, Nkomazi SEZ in Mpumalanga, Namakwa SEZ is in the Northern Cape. Eskom Tubatse pumped storage scheme. This was one of the most, I think, exciting projects that we've been working on as Infrastructure South Africa, and the market was also very interested in helping us prepare and package this particular project. So we give you a status update around all of these projects. Some of them that we were not able to advance includes the health program, but it's work that we're working back now with the National Department of Health to try to progress those projects once again. So that's where I will leave it at in terms of Infrastructure South Africa's presentation this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Masemola, for a detailed briefing on the work of ISA. At this point, I am going to invite Mr. Museveni Ngobeni, who represents the Infrastructure Fund. As I said earlier, Infrastructure Fund is a portfolio of blended projects and programs, which is managed by Infrastructure South Africa and operationalized by the Development Bank of South Africa. Mr. Ngobeni.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The political leadership present here in its different capacities, officials, as well as members of the media. I would like to take you through the IF presentation, just by a way of indicating that this presentation draws exactly from the preamble that was given by the Honorable Minister, as well as the presentation given by the head of ISA. Just to indicate that the IF is a creature of a memorandum of agreement that was concluded between ISA, the National Treasury, and the DBSA. And actually, we draw our pipeline for blended finance projects from ISA, given that they are the single entry point of projects in the country. So essentially, before we can package projects and submit them for funding, they have to be aligned with the national policies which are coordinated by ISA. We also get a lot of help around unblocking some of the constraints that may exist in projects. The head of ISA was talking about environmental approvals, as well as other statutory approvals that might be required. They tend to take a lot of time, but with their intervention, we are able to liaise with the various authorities to ensure that projects don't get stuck on the account of that. We are currently incubated within the DBSA, who's providing operational support to the IF. They fund 50% of our operational costs. However, we are ring-fenced from an operations perspective in a sense that we don't take our investment decisions through the DBSA committees. And this is to ensure that when we go out in the market to crowd in private capital, because DBSA is also a financier, they can also participate on equal footing with other financiers. The National Treasury funds the other 50% of our operations. They also inject capital into projects. So our projects get money through the budget facility for infrastructure. And around 2019-20, they set aside 100 billion in provisional allocations, which then the infrastructure fund, together with the other partners and sponsors, then unlock on a yearly basis. I'll provide an update of where we are since 2021 on tapping into that 100 billion. In relation to this slide, it is just summarizing the blended finance model that the infrastructure fund is adopting. Essentially, we have to look at projects that are able to unlock socio-economic development in the country. And you can see on the lower spectrum, our interventions from an instrument perspective, they range from grant instruments. We also hold short-term kind of positions where we provide instruments like bridge facilities to deal with a certain timing issue. And once that is resolved, we can exit the projects. We also provide concessional loan facilities to de-risk projects, either from a tenor perspective, pricing elements, to ensure that the projects are affordable, but most importantly, to ensure that the private sector does participate in those projects. So essentially, if you look at it together with SIDSSA, we do project development. Once the projects are de-risked, then you can take them to market so that they are able to attract financing. In other projects, we also hold senior debt positions, meaning that we can hold for a longer term where required. However, in our agreement with our sponsors, we have agreed that we will not disrupt the markets. In other words, where markets are well functioning, there's no need for an intervention. The infrastructure fund will not compete with traditional financiers because it will be an unnecessary duplication of effort. We only come in where there's a market failure to de-risk certain elements. This slide is just indicating the extent of development impact that we have unlocked since we started to really operate. We were set up around 2020 in October, but the actual operations, once the team was then capacitated, started around 2021. And since then, from that 100 billion that I was talking about, we managed to unlock about 38 billion in diverse funding instruments from the BFI. So if you think about it, there's still about 62 billion or so that we can still leverage on in the next few years up to 2030 to be able to support the various projects. There are projects that are already in our pipeline as we speak. Other projects are in the SIDSSA pipeline. The head of SIDSSA indicated that they are currently preparing a set of projects, meaning that those projects can also later benefit from the 62 billion that is remaining. In relation to the pipeline, this slide is just showing you the evolution of the approvals. You can see that in the first 2 years, that's when we unlocked the majority of the funding approvals that we are having in various sectors. And to align again with SIDSSA, we play in the same sectors that they operate in. The quantums are the same, around 1 billion. And if you look at the culmination of various projects, you can actually see an accumulation of various sectors comprising the IF pipeline. But something special started to happen last year, where we were requested to focus more on logistics kind of projects from a Transnet perspective. And I think it's for obvious reasons. All of us read about the binding operational constraints that Transnet is grappling with on a daily basis. So we are starting to play in that space. And you will see also in one of my slides, there's a big pipeline of Transnet projects coming in to ensure that we unlock economic growth. And we think that we can do that by unlocking the sector. This slide is very small. However, it summarizes the progress since inception. So since inception, we have about 26 projects that have been approved with a capital cost of about 102 billion, leveraging of 38 billion, as I said, from the fiscus. The difference between the 100 billion and the 38 is what the private sector needs to come in to invest on. So there's scope for private sector to come and support those projects to ensure that they do reach financial close. And you can see a variety of contributions in the social housing space. That's where we are providing bridge facilities, just to give life to the instruments that I was talking about. In the other projects, the water and sanitation projects for water boards, it's mostly grants, wanting to unlock the remainder of the funding from the market. And what we are doing there, we are improving the viability of projects and ensuring that the tariffs in the project areas are affordable. So how do we do this? For example, without the intervention of the infrastructure fund, these water boards are then forced to go and lend at market rates, which are then, when you factor them into the financial modeling, are not always affordable from a tariff perspective. So because of the concessional nature of our instruments, we are able to lower the cost of doing business for those institutions. On the TCTA transaction, you can see the Mkomazi project is one of the largest in the pipeline. That project was stuck. There were discussions with the main off-taker, eThekwini, to be able to conclude an off-take agreement. There were delays because the project was just not affordable. However, with our intervention, the instrument that we put in ensured that the tariffs are at the rate that eThekwini was then comfortable to sign the off-take agreement, and the project is going forward. We're also playing in the Olifants Management Program, where we are also providing concessional funding to be able to ensure that water is supplied to the Skukuni area, where mostly the user base is poor, but also there is a confluence of a stretch of mines that are existing in the area, which will also provide water with, and that project is advanced. Actually, we anticipate to reach commercial close, so the signing of the agreements with the banks around the end of June, and financial close around the end of July. Already, some of the projects are under construction, and you will be able to see the progress in the construction book that the head of ISA and ISA will table on, the minister will table on Tuesday. Essentially, this is the truncated version of the previous slide. It is basically talking now to the investors who are looking for projects to invest in. We removed the projects where funding has already been secured and left the ones where there's a need to get further investments. So a discussion around the IF pipeline offers this opportunity for investors to invest in these projects so that they can reach financial close. In relation to this slide, it is just reflecting the future pipeline, as I indicated. We are engaging with Transnet to be able to unblock a program for them of about 45 billion. And in that program, some of the projects were reflected in the ISA pipeline for obvious reasons because there is alignment. To date, we are going to take about 5 projects to the budget facility for infrastructure for the window that is closing at the end of June with Transnet to start to give effect to catalyze those projects to financial close. We are also starting to support the metros around their water and sanitation program. The city of Tshwane, the city of Cape Town, we are forging relationships with them, having had discussions to be able to leverage on the instruments that we are providing. And lastly, once these projects are then ready for investment, they will go through the relevant processes, and we are of a view that they will offer the country with an opportunity to unlock some of the constraints, especially on the Transnet front. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mngobeni, for taking us through the performance of the Infrastructure Fund and its mandate. At this point, we are going to call on Ms. Nyatela, who is going to take us through the signing ceremony of the MOUs that have been signed with different partners and stakeholders. Following which we will invite members of the media to ask questions, if there are any. Let me place an emphasis on the fact that the questions that I am going to allow, because I'm the one who's moderating this session, are going to be specific to the work of ISA. This is quite encouraging developments that we are presenting here today. We don't want these messages to be diluted by unrelated questions that members of the media may be interested in asking. But if there's an insistence that members of the media wishes to ask, or rather wish to ask certain questions, we will suggest that they take them offline. The minister and the deputy minister are here together with their teams. DG is here, head of ISA is here with her team. I'm sure they are competent enough to deal with all other related questions that are not associated with what we are discussing here today. So we'll allow for that engagement to ensue this way. Ms. Nyatela?
Thank you very much. Colleagues, can I be assisted with the table? Thank you. Okay. So I'll start in the meantime. Throughout the duration of the symposium, we'll be signing a few MOUs with our partners. As you know, Infrastructure South Africa has a very big mandate with a very small team. We rely heavily on the partnerships that we make along the way. In this media briefing particularly, we'll be signing 2 memorandums, and one we'll just speak to because we'll sign it maybe probably tomorrow. And then on Tuesday in plenary, we'll be signing 2 very big memorandums. I'll speak to that at the end. So let's start with the MOU between Brand South Africa and Infrastructure South Africa. I'll speak to what the MOU entails. As you know, Brand South Africa's purpose is to develop and implement proactive and coordinated marketing, communication, and reputation management strategies for South Africa. And Brand South Africa strives to promote active citizenship, build pride and patriotism amongst South Africans. So Infrastructure South Africa and Brand SA have agreed to cooperate on future projects of mutual benefit. The MOU intends to achieve the following. Number 1, we'll be collaborating on strategic activities that will advance South Africa's policies of promoting investment, growth, stability, and prosperity in South Africa. Number 2, we'll be leveraging on Infrastructure South Africa and Brand South Africa projects and properties to drive joint marketing and promotional activities. Number 3, we'll be collaborating to drive stakeholder experience on identified strategic platforms. I'd like to call up Ms. Mameti Masemula and Mr. Nokaneng to please come up and sign the MOU. If the team could please bring the MOUs to the front. Thank you very much. We'll just sign at the last page. Just to indicate that the CEO of Brand South Africa is not in the country, so Mr. Nokaneng is representing Brand South Africa today. Yeah, look happy. Have we signed? Okay, please can we swap and sign? Thank you. Let's clap for them. Thank you very much. We'll move on to the second memorandum that we'll be signing with the Gauteng Infrastructure Financing Agency, or otherwise known as GIFA. The Gauteng team wants your attention. They're making noise about this MOU. They want you to listen. So the Gauteng Infrastructure Financing Agency accelerates delivery of key infrastructure projects in support of Gauteng employment growth and development strategy. Through project development, finance, and partnerships, Infrastructure South Africa has agreed to collaborate on the Gauteng Province Bulk Infrastructure Program pipeline and other strategic projects and/or programs within the province, including implementation plans. In this regard, the MOU aims to, number 1, formalize the collaboration on bulk infrastructure development programs and projects in the province of Gauteng. And I'd like to call up, Mamet is already here. I don't want to get your name wrong. And also Mr. Kemi Ojega, who's the head of project development and compliance from GIFA, to sign on behalf of the CEO. one. Thank you very much. Well done. Thank you. This is a big one, so we're very happy. The third one is an MOU between Infrastructure Technical Assistance Facility and Infrastructure South Africa, but we will not be signing it because the representative is not in Cape Town as yet. But we will sign it during the course of this week, and essentially, the Infrastructure Technical Assistance Facility is within National Treasury and is aimed at technical assistance that contributes to efficient, effective preparation of projects. And the National Treasury through ITAF will provide technical advisory services to Infrastructure South Africa. And basically, we are collaborating on the following two elements. One, providing funding. National Treasury through ITAF will provide funds relating to infrastructure development activities envisaged in the MOU. And number two, technical assistance team. So National Treasury through ITAF will be responsible for the payment of the technical assistance. This is a very big one for us. Unfortunately, members of the media, you might not be here. When we sign it, it might be in a closed setting. But we just wanted to let you know that this MOU will be signed during the symposium. The last two MOUs will be signed in plenary on Tuesday after the President delivers the keynote, and they are with Huawei and with Meridian. We'll make the details available. We don't want to spoil it, but we'll make the details available in plenary that day when we announce. But thank you very much, DM.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nyatela, for the signing of ceremony and the elaborate citations on the MOUs. At this point, I'm going to invite members of the media to ask questions. I'm going to request you to indicate which media houses you're coming from as you ask your questions. Members of the media. I think the media is more interested in offline questions. No, I'm not calling any. Oh, yes. They will be called up to answer questions. Oh, yes, certainly. Do you have a question?
Valen Kirtley from Newsroom Africa. This is a question for both the Minister and the Deputy Minister. How do we ensure that the projects that are currently underway and those that are in the pipeline will actually come to fruition? There's many what we colloquially call white elephants, and when many of these projects succeed their term, how do we ensure that they actually do fulfill the goal of serving the community?
Thank you. Next question. Next question. I think we only have one question. Minister?
Thank you very much for the question. Critically important. And I think that South Africans have a right to be frustrated with the inefficiencies that we sometimes see in delivery, that often projects start and then stop, and it is something that is at the front and center of the 7th administration, and particularly the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure. I think that there's a number of reasons that these things happen. I think sometimes poor planning and coordination. I think the lack of competent project management is also to blame. And that's why we are so fixated on ensuring that Infrastructure South Africa becomes the central point of planning, packaging and preparation for major catalytic infrastructure projects in the country. when you do not plan correctly or the preparation is not done correctly, you are setting yourselves up for failure in that regard. And where we see Infrastructure South Africa's involvement and their hand and their approach to projects, we see a reduction in delays. We see a reduction in approvals. There is a good example in the Eastern Cape with an IPP project where they actually reduced years of delays, and they took that down to 85 days. So you've got to get the preparation and the planning correct to begin with. And that is a big focus of ours. We also want to make sure that issues like social facilitation are dealt with upfront. And so in the next while, we'll be launching, we'll be taking to Cabinet the National Social Facilitation Framework on how all projects need to be embedded in social facilitation in the planning, the project planning phase. You don't want to come just as you're about to start. And also, how do we come with a standardized approach to project management? I think one of those issues that we see is project management takes on an ad hoc approach. And I think that if we have an A to Z on project management, we'll have a line of sight and an understanding of how those projects are expected to be completed. So I think, in short, we need to be much more hands-on than we are. We need to have much more better coordination. We need to finalize the establishment of Infrastructure South Africa. And you hear me say that a lot over the next 2 days. We need to have a coordinated approach to infrastructure projects as opposed to the various strands that infrastructure takes place. And I think this morning we saw what project planning in its fullness achieves when we went to Potsdam under the city of Cape Town, a project, once it eventually got going after COVID, it delayed it, etc. They're actually running ahead of time, don't hear that often, and they're running to budget. So it can be done if those right mechanisms are in place, and I'm convinced that that is something that we can achieve in this administration if we give Infrastructure South Africa the space to be able to do so. DM, I don't know if you'd like to add anything further. Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you very much to all of you colleagues for gracing us with your presence. At this point, I am going to call to the front the Deputy Minister Zigarala, to close the media briefing.
Thank you, Deputy Minister in the Presidency, Deputy Minister Murolong, the Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure, Mr. Dean McPherson, ministers from our sister countries. We wish to extend our greetings to all of you. We are quite humbled by your presence. The Director General, as well as officials, ladies and gentlemen from the media, we thank you for your participation, not only this morning and now, but we are grateful that you will be with us through the period of this symposium. The Sustainable Infrastructure Development Symposium South Africa has evolved to be a platform to account and to give details on the next phase of project of infrastructure that would be implemented. And therefore, as the Minister said, we will be accounting on what we did from the last year's infrastructure book, but detailing the work that will be done going forward. The President, after we were hit by COVID-19, President Ramaphosa said one of the things that will address the challenges of the economy will be infrastructure development, and therefore, to stimulate the economy, we must ensure that infrastructure is a flywheel upon which the economy grows. And there are two strategies that we're putting forward as government on growing the economy. On one hand, it's infrastructure development. On the other hand, is industrialization. And therefore, we want to give hope to all people, not only South Africans, but all people that South Africa is turning a difficult moment, but we are going to realize the fruits of these. In few days ago, the Minister of Finance presented the budget, and two issues are an anchor and addresses the question that was asked. The first is that the minister promised that the regulations that were published on the triple Ps are now moving toward being finalized. It will be easy for the private sector to invest in the public infrastructure. The infrastructure we have was built by the state-owned entities. Given that the factors and challenges we have now, we have to mobilize the investment from the private sector. And therefore, these triple Ps, the regulations are going to be of great help to fast track the process. But the second point that the minister raised was that we are now going to make mechanisms for departments that are strategic to develop and establish their triple Ps implementing units. And these units used to be in the treasury alone, and now we need to ensure that departments like the Public Works and Infrastructure, as well as SIDSSA, develop this instrument of fast-tracking the implementation of triple Ps. The last thing that he said is that we are now going to even allow unsolicited bid to come and be considered. An unsolicited bid is presented and it's considered based on whether there can be no competition in the market. And I believe those were critical steps that addresses the question that will help us to ensure that projects are funded on time. And the minister emphasized the point of facilitation to ensure that all stakeholders are involved from the beginning till the project is completed. We want to thank the presence of ministers from our continent. We engage with Africa as Africans. We engage with Africa not as big brothers. We know that the development of South Africa and the future of South Africa is intertwined with the future of our neighboring countries. So when we see colleagues from Uganda, from Namibia, from Eswatini, and from Lesotho, we know that we have brothers and sisters, we are together, and we enjoy being with you. We know your contribution in our historical struggle against colonialism, and we know that we share common future with you. We thank all of you who have participated in this launch, and we invite you to be part of all sessions that will take place as the symposium continues. We thank you. Siyabonga.
Thank you very much. We've reached the end. Please join us for some snacks if there are still some left. And we'll see all of you tomorrow. Just so we know, tomorrow we start at 9 o'clock at the Leaders Forum. That's the official gathering of our political principals with the delegation from the continent. And then we'll be back here for the G20 themed sessions. And yeah, that's the program for tomorrow. We'll see you all tomorrow.